Chapter 161. Nagini's Reply and Newt Scamander. None of these are problems, Tom. You're my best friend, and I won't let anything happen to you. Just wait for me. After writing that, Xiaji promptly closed his notebook, placed it inside a wooden box, and locked it. Tom wanted to tell Xiaji not to lock himself up. After all, doing so would prevent him from sensing anything around him. But Xiaji moved far too quickly, almost as if he were eager to steal a chicken right then and there, unable to wait even a moment longer. Tom tried to call out to him, but alas, the diary couldn't produce any sound. All he could do was watch helplessly as Xiaji locked himself up once more. Then, once again, Tom fell into a deep sleep amidst the darkness. Of course, Xiaji didn't immediately go off to steal any chickens. After putting the diary away, he stretched lazily and lay back down on his bed. For some reason, a faint smile tugged at his lips, eventually growing into a laugh eerily similar to that of a psychopath. Hagrid's currently tending to his pumpkins in his backyard. 043. That was the name he gave them in anticipation of Halloween. Just as he pondered whether to cast a swelling charm on them, he spotted Xiaji approaching. Xiaji strolled leisurely from the castle gates toward Hagrid's hut, spotting Hagrid's towering, broad-shouldered figure from afar. "Hey, Xiaji. It's been ages since you last came by for tea," Hagrid called out loudly. "Hagrid, I was worried you might not be home." Xiaji wrapped his robe tightly around himself. The weather had begun to turn chilly. Though he wasn't particularly sensitive to cold, he simply disliked the feeling. "Oh, of course I'm here. Where else would I be? I thought you might have gone to visit Norberta."
"Ah.
I bet you'll be quite surprised when you return home and see her." Hagrid instantly grew excited upon hearing Norberta mentioned. He led Xiaji into his hut, which remained wonderfully warm. "Surprised? Do you mean Norberta set my house on fire?" Dobby didn't mention anything like that. Xiaji exclaimed in alarm.
"Oh, now.
"Norberta's such a good girl. She'd never do such a thing." Hagrid boomed in protest. In his eyes, Norberta would always remain a lovely, obedient little darling, never one to cause any trouble like those naughty kids. "That's a relief." Xiaji breathed a sigh of relief. "I must say, that little house elf of yours is truly dependable. Honestly, I doubted he'd manage to care for Norberta properly, but he's done splendidly." Hagrid handed Xiaji a cup of tea and a stack of rock cakes. Xiaji examined one carefully. "Rest assured, I followed your instructions precisely. It definitely won't be hard at all. In fact, I think it's even too brittle." With that, he confidently took a bite. Crunch, a large chunk broke off.
"See?
I told you it wouldn't be hard." Yet tears welled in Xiaji's eyes as he glanced at Hagrid, then promptly spat the cake out. "Hagrid, did you really follow my instructions? Why is it harder than ever?" "I nearly cracked a tooth." Evidently, Hagrid meant brittler as in harder, and that's what he perceived as an improvement. And yet, his innate danger sense hadn't triggered at all before that bite. Was it assuming he'd effortlessly chew through the cake unscathed? But now his tooth ached horribly. "Oh, perhaps I missed a step or two." Hagrid suddenly seemed uncertain. To him, the cake hadn't seemed hard at all. Never mind. It's not important. Xiaji resolved never to eat Hagrid's rock cakes again. "Hagrid, may I keep a few roosters here? Is that all right?" "Roosters? Of course. In fact, I already raised plenty. If you need any, feel free to take them anytime." Hagrid generously offered. "No. What I need are newly hatched chicks. Could you get me a few? I have a use for them." "That's no trouble at all. I'll buy some tomorrow." Hagrid waved it off as trivial. "Try to pick the liveliest ones, ideally ones that crow right at birth." Hagrid chuckled. "That's right up my alley. Rest easy. You'll see them tomorrow. I guarantee they'll all be full of energy." After lingering a while longer, Xiaji pulled his robe back on and left Hagrid's hut, returning to the castle. At last, Tom began asking Xiaji for quinquina, far later than Xiaji had anticipated. Xiaji knew precisely what changes would occur after Tom consumed a life sacrifice. Hence, he planned to add a few special ingredients to Tom's offering. Tom required both vitality and soul energy. Since those were what he needed, Xiaoji resolved to provide them, albeit with his own enhancements. Xiaoji dared to tamper with it precisely because, in this world, no one surpassed him in soul magic. Even Voldemort's fragmented soul still carried Xiaoji's fabricated soul shards, wandering Albania to this day. At times, Xiaoji even viewed the world through Voldemort's eyes, and Voldemort remained utterly unaware of any anomaly. Still, these enhanced offerings required careful cultivation. That very night, as he lay in bed emitting a laugh eerily similar to Voldemort's, a bold idea surfaced in his mind. The next morning, Xiaoji sat in the great hall having breakfast. "Is this rice noodle roll?" "It's delicious." Cedric happily savored the treat before him. Lately, Cedric often lingered near Xiaoji. Only here could he sample such diverse delicacies he'd never tasted before. Cassandra and Hermione now hesitated to join Xiaoji. Both feared Cedric might blurt out something inappropriate. Just then, owls swooped in, delivering letters and parcels to the young witches and wizards. Suddenly, a package appeared before Xiaoji. Snowball stood proudly before him, all aloofness. "Feed me a bit, I'm starving." Xiaoji offered slices of mutton to Snowball. Both Fox and Yasairi seemed utterly fond of this sliced meat. Influenced by them, Snowball had also grown fond of it. Xiaoji opened the package. Other than Nagini, who else would send him parcels via Snowball? Inside lay a stack of books and a small pile of photographs, with a letter tucked among them. "Xiaoji, not long ago, I reunited with an old friend, Newt Scamander. Unbelievable, really. The last time I saw him, he was merely a man in his 20s. Now he's grown so old." He was utterly astonished upon seeing me. I conveyed your admiration to him. He was thrilled to know a talented young witch like you counts himself among his fans. Should the chance arise, he'd dearly love to meet you, the one capable of breaking Norbert's blood curse. Nagini. P.S. enclosed our photos and a signed book from Newt. Xiaoji set the letter aside and began flipping through the photos. The first black and white image showed Nagini joyously standing beside a rather shy-looking elderly man. He wore a bashful smile, head slightly bowed, stealing glances at the camera now and then. Other photos featured Nagini alongside Newt's family, as well as Newt at work caring for magical creatures. Each bore a graceful signature. Newt Scamander. Chapter 162. Cedric. Why are all your friends pretty girls? The package Xiaoji received quickly caught the attention of his friends. "May I take a look?" Cedric noticed the photos in Xiaoji's hands. "Of course." Xiaoji handed the photos to Cedric, then began flipping through the stack of books. These books included the latest revised edition of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, a study of phoenix behavior, the care of unicorns, and so on. On the title page of each book was a handwritten signature from Newt. Newt must have learned from Nagini that Xiaoji had a herd of unicorns at home, even a phoenix, which is why he sent these books. The absence of any books about dragons was probably because Nagini didn't mention it to Newt. After all, keeping a dragon was illegal, so, even though she trusted Newt, she figured it was better not to bring it up. Xiaoji pulled out a piece of parchment and casually tapped it. Clear handwriting instantly appeared on it. "Nagini, I'm thrilled to receive your reply and the package. I absolutely adore these photos and books. It's wonderful that Mr. Newt agreed to meet me. I truly hope I can visit him during the summer holidays. I'm deeply passionate about magical creatures. Wish you a pleasant journey. Xiaoji." Little Snowball had already eaten and drunk to his heart's content, now gazing at Xiaoji with utter disdain. "Hurry up and deliver my reply. It's way more fun over there than staying with you." Xiaoji flicked Little Snowball on the head, then folded the parchment and handed it to him. In an instant, Little Snowball zipped off, as if terrified Xiaoji might flick him again. Cedric was still examining the photos. "Oh, who's this lovely lady in the photo?" "That's my good friend. She just started her journey around the world this year," Xiaoji replied. "Why do all your good friends happen to be pretty girls?" Cedric's tone carried a hint of jealousy. "Oh." Cedric, if Harry found out he turned into Harry, he'd probably be pretty upset. Xiaoji sat back down and resumed savoring his breakfast. Newt Scamander, that name sounds so familiar. Cedric murmured, gazing at the signature on the back of the photo. Here, take a look at this book. Xiaoji handed him the latest edition of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
Oh.
Merlin's beard. This is the author of Fantastic Beasts, Mr. Newt Scamander? Cedric exclaimed in awe. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them had always been a must-have book for Hogwarts students. Newt Scamander held great esteem among them. You actually received a signed photo and signed books from Mr. Scamander. Cedric's eyes brimmed with envy. When Hermione saw the books in Xiaoji's package, she couldn't resist approaching and curiously flipped through them. All were books about magical creatures, each one perfectly suited to Xiaoji. Clearly, Newt Scamander had carefully selected them after hearing about Xiaoji from Nagini. Hermione, how about we visit Mr. Scamander together this summer? Xiaoji suddenly suggested. Just the two of us? Hermione's face instantly flushed red. I wonder if Cassandra would come along. But even if she wanted to, Mr. Vole probably wouldn't let her. Xiaoji sighed. Excuse me, but I doubt my father would allow it either. Hermione's expression turned icy as she turned away.
Huh?
But I figured Mr. Granger would definitely approve. Xiaoji looked utterly bewildered. Mr. Granger wasn't nearly as overprotective of his daughter as Mr. Vole. TSK Xiaoji, I think this isn't a problem with her dad. It's a problem with you. Cedric, having heard Xiaoji's utterly clueless remark, felt like he was going insane. Such a perfect chance to travel with girls, and it got ruined by just one careless comment from this guy. One really can't be too greedy, Xiaoji, Cedric said earnestly. Seriously, if you want to take girls on a trip, one is more than enough.
Xiaoji shot him a glance.
Too small-minded. You know what? This summer, I'll definitely manage to bring several girls along. Oh, Cedric sucked in a sharp breath. Sometimes I really can't tell if you're clueless or just too aware. Whether I get it or not and how much, it all depends on the situation. We've got an old Eastern proverb. It's good to be deliberately confused. When you truly understand what needs understanding and deliberately stay ignorant where ignorance is called for, only then have you truly lived. Xiaoji spoke with profound wisdom. Oh, Cedric gulped again. After being bombarded with all these understanding remarks, his brain felt completely overloaded. So, were you deliberately saying that just now?
Huh?
What did I say deliberately? Xiaoji widened his eyes, feigning total confusion. Oh, this was what Xiaoji meant by deliberately ignorant. But what was the point of that? Though he didn't quite get it, it somehow sounded incredibly profound. He gave up trying to decipher Xiaoji's intent. He didn't even have a girlfriend himself. How could he possibly understand someone at Xiaoji's level? After all, no matter where he went, girls always flocked to him. And sure enough, another girl approached. She seemed to be looking for Xiaoji too. Luna was cradling her crumple-horned snorkack. Her wand rested casually atop her ear. She walked over and curiously glanced at the photos in front of Xiaoji. Morning, Xiaoji. Morning, Luna. Did you have breakfast? Today's dumplings are excellent. I think you'd love them. I already ate, thank you. Actually, Professor Flitwick asked you to come see him at noon. Professor Flitwick? What does he want with me? Luna shook her head. The head of house only said to ask you to come. I have no idea what it's about. All right. By the way, Luna, do you have any plans this summer? I'm planning to visit Mr. Scamander. He's got tons of magical creatures at his place. Luna's eyes instantly sparkled.
Yes.
Will Cassandra and Hermione be coming too? If their dads allow it, Xiaoji chuckled nervously. If it's with you, my dad definitely won't object. Luna beamed sweetly at Xiaoji, then skipped off joyfully. Tisk, Cedric frowned from the side. What's wrong? And nothing. I accidentally bit into a lemon just now. It was super sour, Cedric replied earnestly. As for whether Xiaoji could actually bring multiple girls on a trip this summer, whether anyone else believed it or not, Cedric certainly did. That morning there were two main classes. Having fully enjoyed his magical feast, Xiaoji dozed off peacefully during History of Magic. Hardly anyone managed to stay awake during Professor Binz's lectures. Even Hermione, who struggled to scribble notes, appeared half asleep. At noon, after a hearty meal in the Great Hall, Xiaoji headed to Professor Flitwick's office. Though Xiaoji had performed admirably in Flitwick's classes, earning Gryffindor plenty of points, the two hadn't interacted much. Xiaoji politely knocked on Flitwick's office door. "Enter." A high-pitched voice answered from within. Xiaoji pushed the door open and saw Professor Flitwick seated on a specially elevated chair. Naturally, without such a chair, he couldn't reach his desk at all. "Oh,
Xiaoji.
I've wanted to speak with you privately, but never found the time before." Flitwick hopped down from his chair. With each step, thick books materialized beneath his feet, forming a staircase. "Good day, Professor Flitwick. May I ask what brings me here?" "Oh, please have a seat, Xiaoji." Flitwick waved his wand. A normal chair appeared before his desk. "Chilled pumpkin juice or black tea, 043? Black tea, please." The weather was growing cooler now. Xiaoji no longer craved cold drinks. Instantly, a steaming cup of black tea appeared on the desk. Xiaoji took a sip, then gazed at Flitwick with puzzled eyes. Flitwick smiled warmly. "Xiaoji, your outstanding performance in charms is well known. Yet I've heard rumors that you single-handedly defeated an elite squad of Aurors inside Gringotts' underground vaults." "Indeed, with all due respect, they probably didn't even qualify as elite," Xiaoji replied with a smile. "They couldn't even cast a decent shield charm." Back then, Xiaoji had single-handedly overwhelmed an elite Auror squad. The Ministry of Magic desperately tried to keep it secret, but to no avail. Naturally, Xiaoji saw no need to shield the Ministry from embarrassment. If that's truly the case, that's absolutely wonderful. Flitwick beamed. Professor, I'm a bit confused. See, if you can defeat Aurors, your dueling skills must be exceptional." Flitwick's face flushed with excitement at the mere mention of dueling. "Well, if you mean knocking opponents down with a wand, then yes, I'm quite decent." Xiaoji humbly responded. "That's absolutely perfect." Flitwick chuckled. "Do you enjoy dueling?" "Yes, I truly do." Xiaoji smiled modestly. He genuinely loved it, though few opponents ever gave him a proper challenge. "I hear you were a dueling champion in your youth. That's truly incredible." Flitwick chuckled gleefully, proudly displaying his trophies and medals lining his bookshelves. "Yet ever since returning to teach at Hogwarts, I've never competed in duels again. Those passionate days truly do haunt me. So, might I ask for your guidance in honing my dueling abilities?" Chapter 163. You want me to use all my strength? Professor, you might die. Of course. In fact, I'm quite looking forward to seeing your performance. Professor Flitwick excitedly jumped off his seat. Xiaoji followed behind Professor Flitwick and arrived at a completely empty classroom. He was somewhat puzzled. Why had Professor Flitwick suddenly called him here? Was it simply to test his dueling abilities following the incident at Gringotts? If that were the case, Professor Flitwick should have sought him out back when Xiaoji was in his first year. Why wait until his second year? Back then, Xiaoji had effortlessly defeated an elite team of Aurors, a feat the Ministry of Magic simply couldn't conceal. Therefore, Professor Flitwick should have known about him long ago. Though many questions lingered in his mind, one thing was certain. Today, Professor Flitwick had summoned him specifically to test his dueling prowess. As for the reasons behind it, Professor Flitwick would undoubtedly explain them later. For now, it was best to wait and see. How about this place? Professor Flitwick waved his wand, causing all desks and chairs to levitate upward and neatly stack themselves against one side of the room. Instantly, a large open space appeared in the middle of the classroom. This is perfect. Please instruct me, Professor. Xiaoji drew his ebony wand. Go ahead, attack me, Professor Flitwick said, standing still while gripping his own wand. Though short in stature, he exuded an unusual aura of confidence now, exuding a palpable sense of pressure. Both took their positions facing each other, bowed respectfully, stepped back a few paces, then turned back around. Expelliarmus! Xiaoji struck first. Professor Flitwick effortlessly deflected the spell, his brows furrowed slightly. Xiaoji, hold back. Use your full strength. Use my full strength? Are you certain, Professor? Xiaoji hesitated. If he unleashed his full power, even an Expelliarmus could prove fatal. Just as it had been for Professor Quirrell, who had been turned to ash by a single Expelliarmus cast by Professor Dumbledore. Absolutely. Only by going all out can I truly gauge your abilities. Rest assured, your teacher here is quite formidable. Professor Flitwick declared confidently. Very well, reluctantly, Xiaoji agreed. Of course, he had no intention of truly going all out. He planned to use only 30% of his magical power, and absolutely no Phoenix energy, as that could easily kill someone. The reason he limited himself to just 30% was that his wand had been modified. Now it amplified spell power by over 50%. Pushing it further might exceed Professor Flitwick's ability to withstand it. Of course, this wasn't to say he underestimated Professor Flitwick at all. Rather, he fully understood just how powerful his own abilities had become, basically maxed out at this point. Come on, let me see what you're truly capable of. Professor Flitwick stood calmly in place, awaiting Xiaoji's next move. From Xiaoji's earlier attempts, he deduced that Xiaoji hadn't exerted even half his true power. Yet, even that level of output seemed quite impressive. If Xiaoji unleashed his full strength, he'd likely surpass even elite Aurs. Still, Professor Flitwick remained confident he could withstand it. Thus, his demeanor stayed relaxed until Expelliarmus. A blazing red beam erupted from Xiaoji's ebony wand. Upon seeing that crimson glow, Professor Flitwick went completely numb. He'd assumed earlier that Xiaoji had already exerted 50% effort, but now it seemed that even that had been barely 10% at most. It was as if Xiaoji had been holding back to an extreme degree. There was no time to stand frozen now. Reacting swiftly, Professor Flitwick rolled sideways. The spell's power appeared immense. His shield charm might not suffice. The red beam grazed past his hair, then slammed into the wall, carving out a massive crater. Smoke curled upward from the impact site. Sweat instantly beaded on Professor Flitwick's forehead. Had he been struck? Professor, are you all right? Xiaoji hurried over, helping him up. Ahem, I'm fine. Cough. This is still a duel, Xiaoji. You're leaving yourself wide open to counterattacks like this. Professor Flitwick appeared somewhat flustered. Shall we continue? Absolutely. Professor Flitwick gritted his teeth. His extensive dueling experience allowed him to adapt even against overwhelming magical force. Very well, Professor. Stupefy. Bang. Boom. Professor, are you all right? I'm perfectly fine. Boom. Crack. Professor, perhaps I should hold back a bit. No need. Keep using full strength. Boom. Bang. Cough. Perhaps dial it back just a tad? Professor, I feel like I've run out of magic entirely. I doubt I can continue this duel now. Xiaoji sat down on the floor, panting heavily, clearly utterly exhausted. Professor Flitwick, somewhat awkwardly, spoke up. Ahem. Since your magical reserves appear depleted, let's call this sparring session to an end for today. Clearly, he was allowing Xiaoji an easy way out. With his vast dueling expertise, there was no way Professor Flitwick couldn't tell whether someone had truly exhausted their magic. Yet he'd never seen anyone who'd run dry yet still not even break a sweat. Hearing the duel was over, Xiaoji instantly perked up and stood back to his feet. Professor Flitwick watched this with silent bewilderment. Still, he was genuinely delighted. He'd realized Xiaoji was an absolute dueling prodigy. To date, Professor Flitwick had never once been outmatched in duels. Yet today, he'd been completely dominated by Xiaoji. Though Xiaoji's technique still lacked refinement, his command over spells was flawless. Most importantly, his magical reserves seemed inexhaustible. Professor Flitwick had only managed to keep pace through sheer experience. Continue much longer, and it would have been him running out of power first. Xiaoji once again followed Professor Flitwick back to his office. Professor Flitwick invited Xiaoji to sit down, then poured him a cup of black tea. He returned to his own seat, poured himself a glass of chilled sherry soda, and downed it in one go.
Ah,
It's been ages since I've had such a thoroughly enjoyable duel. Professor Flitwick exclaimed joyfully. Though Xiaoji's attacks had been difficult to counter, every spell Professor Flitwick unleashed had been effortlessly deflected by him. Hence, he felt utterly exhilarated. This is wonderful. You're an absolute dueling genius. Professor Flitwick praised wholeheartedly. By next year, you'll easily qualify to represent British wizards in the International Wizard Dueling Tournament. Seriously, you've got what it takes to bring home the championship trophy. Professor, did you summon me today specifically to assess my eligibility for that tournament? Oh, not quite. That tournament was merely an idea that just crossed my mind. In truth, I wanted to test your dueling abilities, but for another purpose entirely. Oh, what might that be? See, Professor Lockhart recently approached me, expressing his desire to establish a dueling club at Hogwarts to teach students combat techniques. He asked me to serve as his assistant. Professor Flitwick spoke happily. Though Lockhart can be rather unreliable at times, this proposal genuinely appealed to me. A dueling club? Xiaoji appeared bewildered. Wasn't this supposed to happen only after Halloween? Moreover, hadn't Lockhart originally intended for Snape to be his assistant? Why was it Professor Flitwick now? Had he misremembered the plot, or had events shifted due to unforeseen circumstances? Xiaoji leaned toward the latter explanation. So you sought me out. Is there perhaps some way I might assist you? Xiaoji asked curiously. Precisely. I'd like you to join us later to demonstrate dueling techniques. But surely you and Professor Lockhart alone would suffice. Now, what I'm about to say might inadvertently slight Professor Lockhart, so please keep it confidential, all right? Of course. I won't speak of it. You know I've long studied dueling extensively. Recently, I had an in-depth discussion with Lockhart on the subject. Sadly, the results were disappointing, Xiaoji. Though he writes quite well, I suspect he's rather clueless about dueling fundamentals. I fear that. You're worried that you'd swiftly defeat Professor Lockhart during the demonstration, so you've brought me along as a backup? Exactly. Without a proper demonstration, the students won't truly learn anything. Thus, we can stage a proper duel right before them. Professor Flitwick smiled warmly. But I'm rather weak. Oh, hearing you say that makes me feel rather ashamed, Xiaoji. Very well, I accept, Professor Flitwick. In the end, Xiaoji agreed. In the original storyline, Lockhart had been swiftly defeated by Snape, after which students were left to pair off and duel freely. The result? They learned nothing at all, eventually even abandoning their wands to brawl barefisted. Professor Flitwick had anticipated this, which was why he'd sought Xiaoji out as his assistant, to instantly replace Lockhart should he falter. Just try dialing back your power a touch during the demonstration, all right? Professor Flitwick chuckled sheepishly. Understood. Xiaoji nodded knowingly. Chapter 164. Cassandra Vole. You asked her to do your homework? I could have. Xiaoji spent a long time discussing dueling techniques with Professor Flitwick that day, not leaving until quite late. Thanks to Xiaoji's arrival, a butterfly effect had occurred. Many plot points had changed as a result. At the very least, the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets wouldn't appear in the castle this year to harm anyone. Additionally, Lockhart's dueling club wouldn't officially commence until next month. Lockhart had organized this dueling club purely to salvage some of his lost prestige. Xiaoji never quite understood why Lockhart possessed such confidence as to challenge Snape one-on-one. Was it possible that because his own fabricated lies seemed so convincing, he ended up fooling himself into believing them too? Beyond that, Xiaoji truly couldn't fathom any other reason that would drive someone to such recklessness as to provoke Snape. Surely, he wasn't under the impression that Snape was the weakest opponent. Now that the plot had changed, Lockhart intended to face off against Professor Flitwick instead. He surely didn't imagine that Flitwick's reputation as a dueling champion was equally fabricated, just like his own, right? Xiaoji simply found it incomprehensible. That afternoon happened to be a day with no classes, which allowed Xiaoji to stay in Professor Flitwick's office for so long. By the time Xiaoji exited the castle, the sky outside had completely darkened. He quietly approached Hagrid's hut. "Oh, I thought you wouldn't come today." Upon noticing Xiaoji, Hagrid happily welcomed him inside. Inside Hagrid's hut, there stood a wooden crate containing 10 lively little roosters, each one brimming with vigor and energy. Xiaoji nodded in satisfaction. "Hagrid, you really know your stuff." "Just a minor feat," Hagrid replied, rolling up his sleeves in an attempt to help Xiaoji move the crate. "So, do you plan to keep these little fellows here, or take them with you?" "I'll be taking them," Xiaoji said. He had some rather sinister experiments planned for these poor creatures, experiments Hagrid absolutely couldn't witness.
Oh.
"Where exactly do you intend to raise them?" "I'd advise against keeping them under your bed. It's far too easy for someone to stumble upon them." Hagrid spoke awkwardly, recalling how, back when he hadn't yet been expelled, he'd hidden a baby werewolf beneath his bed, only to be discovered by everyone anyway. "Relax, Hagrid. I've got a perfect place for them." Xiaoji patted his pocket. "It involves some special little magic." Hagrid immediately grasped what he meant and refrained from further questions. After all, the extension charm couldn't be casually abused by ordinary individuals. Yet Hagrid himself had once employed it on his own pocket, so he fully understood Xiaoji's intentions. A flash of light ensued, and the entire wooden crate vanished into Xiaoji's pocket. "Marvelous. Back in my day, I knew no magic nearly this wondrous. If only I'd been able to do such things." Hagrid seemed to slip into some rather unpleasant recollections. Xiaoji guessed he was probably reminiscing about the old days, when he'd been falsely accused by Tom Riddle and subsequently expelled. "Hagrid, I must be off now. Curfew's approaching." You'd best hurry back. Otherwise those little fellows might suffocate." Hagrid appeared somewhat dejected at that moment. Xiaoji nodded, then turned to leave. Hagrid's past had been tragically unfair, so Xiaoji resolved to help clear his name as well. This posed no great difficulty for Xiaoji and wouldn't interfere with his own plans whatsoever. Moreover, earning Hagrid's gratitude could prove immensely beneficial. Perhaps this would even serve as an opportunity to forge connections with the giants. Inside his suitcase, Xiaoji released that entire brood of roosters. He then sprinkled specially formulated feed over them. This feed contained phoenix blood, ensuring the birds would grow faster and stronger than ever before. Once the little creatures had eaten their fill, Xiaoji proceeded to cast soul magic upon each one individually. Violet-colored rays gently penetrated each rooster's skull. Almost instantaneously, their once clouded eyes turned crystal clear. They seemed to have gained a modicum of sentience. Xiaoji gazed contentedly at the roosters now wandering about freely. Next, he'd simply have to wait for them to mature. From that day onward, Xiaoji would enter daily thrice to feed them and apply soul magic, a routine he'd maintain until they fully matured and their souls reached the standard he'd set. That day would approach Xiaoji to inform him of the upcoming Quidditch practice schedule, asking him to relay the details to Cassandra Vole as well. Xiaoji contacted Cassandra via their ring, relaying the information. Afterwards, he intended to slip away and discuss devising some entertaining fireworks with George and Fred. Yet the very next second, he abandoned this plan and headed straight to the library to complete his homework. The reason? While studying in the library, Cassandra had unfortunately noticed Hermione helping Xiaoji with his assignments. Naturally, Cassandra grew furious, though not because Xiaoji hadn't done his own work. She was infuriated that he hadn't asked her to assist him, opting instead for Hermione's help. Seems tonight, he'd have no choice but to do his homework himself, Xiaoji thought, shaking his head resignedly. He cautiously entered the library, glancing around to locate Cassandra and Hermione. Instead, he spotted Madame Pants seated at her desk, looking utterly distressed, with a modified computer before her. Right now, Madame Pants was in deep distress. This computer had inexplicably powered down on its own. Truth be told, when Professor Dumbledore had first brought this so-called automated book-searching computer back, Madame Pants had scoffed at it. How could any Muggle invention possibly rival the wonders of actual magic? Yet at Dumbledore's request, She reluctantly gave it a try for several days and promptly became utterly enamored. With this computer, she no longer needed to painstakingly log borrowed books onto thick ledgers. The machine automatically recorded who, when, and where borrowed which volumes, along with their due dates. Alerts even popped up when items neared their return deadline. Its powerful search function was equally impressive. She no longer needed to stand up. Simply typing in a book's title or parameters would instantly display it on screen. One mere click caused the book to fly over and open right to the relevant page. All this had exponentially boosted Madame Pance's efficiency, making her utterly devoted to this machine. Yet today, she was in utter despair. Today, the computer had inexplicably shut itself down. She'd attempted numerous spells to fix it, to no avail. Thus, today, she'd reverted to her old methods, manually assisting students in locating needed books. As the saying goes, it's easy to grow accustomed to luxury, but nearly impossible to return to simplicity. Once humans adapt to convenience, reverting proves immensely difficult. This holds true for both wizards and muggles alike. She'd intended to ask Professor Dumbledore to repair it, but unfortunately, he wasn't in his office today. She had absolutely no idea that Xiaji was the one who'd modified this very computer. Chapter 165. I hear you're Dumbledore's favorite student? Madame Pance noticed Xiaji walking in. What book are you looking for? Or have you come here to do homework? Madame Pance was feeling rather down. She longed for the day to end quickly, so she could head to Professor Dumbledore first thing the next morning to get that computer fixed. Otherwise, she'd have to endure another miserable day tomorrow. Merlin above, how had she never realized how grueling this work was before? Yet Xiaji didn't respond to her words. Instead, he stared intently at the computer before him. Madame Pance pursed her lips, somewhat annoyed. This student seemed far too impolite. She'd spoken to him, yet he ignored her completely. In truth, upon entering and seeing the computer was powered off, Xiaji already understood why Madame Pance appeared so dejected. He'd asked Professor Dumbledore to place this computer inside the library, partly to test it out as well. Now that it was off, something clearly had gone wrong. He began carefully analyzing the issue in his mind. He had all the technical specifications of this computer stored in his memory. There were no fewer than 10 possible causes for such a shutdown. All he needed to do was systematically check each one. Because he was deeply engrossed in thought, he failed to hear what Madame Pance said. Suddenly, before Madame Pance could react, Xiaji stepped forward and expertly dismantled the computer in front of him. What are you doing? Madame Pance was livid. That's a very important machine, a valuable possession of Hogwarts. How dare this student just take it apart? What am I doing? Of course I'm fixing it. Only after being yelled at by Madame Pance did Xiaji finally snap back to reality. He couldn't understand why she was so furious. Didn't she realize he was the one who'd modified this computer? Actually, Madame Pance truly had no idea, since Professor Dumbledore had forgotten to inform her when he placed the computer in the library. How dare you damage school property? Tell me your name and house. You'll be docked points and put in detention. Now, get out of here at once. You're forbidden from entering the library ever again. Madame Pance angrily raised her feather duster. Since Xiaji rarely visited the library and only came late at night after closing hours, secretly, to the restricted section, Madame Pance had barely ever seen him. She didn't recognize him at all. Her loud voice immediately drew the attention of every student in the library. I'm repairing the computer, Madame Pance. Xiaji spread his hands. This is something I modified myself, only I can fix it. Nonsense. At such a young age. You dare to lie? Madame Pance spoke furiously. How old are you exactly? How can you claim to have modified such an extraordinary piece of alchemical craftsmanship? Though Xiaji understood that Dumbledore had neglected to inform Madame Pance about him, and he also grasped why she doubted that someone so young could have crafted such a complex device, he still felt quite annoyed now. There's one thing I must correct, Madame Pance. This machine was never Hogwarts property. Its owner is me, and I even still have the receipt from when I bought it at a Muggle store. Though Madame Pance still refused to believe him, Xiaoji's unwavering confidence left her somewhat astonished. Unfortunately, I left the receipt at home and didn't bring it with me. But there's a very simple way to verify what I'm saying. Xiaoji patted the computer's screen. If I manage to fix it, that'll prove my words are true. At that point, I hope you'll apologize to me and promise to treat students who borrow books more kindly instead of chasing them away with a feather duster. Xiaoji spoke calmly, yet his tone held no trace of politeness. I refuse to believe you're the one who modified this machine, and I won't let you touch it any further. Normally, upon seeing someone as earnest as Xiaoji, most people would at least hesitate and seek verification. But Madame Pants had always possessed a rather fiery temper. Moreover, in all her years of managing the library, she'd never encountered such audacious students. How dare they talk back to her? For years, no one had ever dared to defy her like this. Even Professor Dumbledore always treated her with utmost courtesy. Enraged beyond reason, Madame Pants allowed her rage to cloud her judgment. It wasn't so much that she disbelieved Xiaoji, rather, she simply wanted to argue with him. Now, you'll accompany me to see Mr. Filch, so he can take you to Professor McGonagall. Cassandra Vole and Hermione had long since noticed the commotion over here. What's going on? What happened? Hermione asked, astonished. Well, she doesn't believe I can fix this computer. She thinks I deliberately broke it. Seriously, why would I do that? What benefit would I gain from it? Why wouldn't she believe you? Isn't this the computer you modified? Cassandra asked, arms crossed. I told her. She just won't accept that I'm the one who modified it. Says I'm too young to have done it.
Oh.
Age means nothing. Some people remain complete fools no matter how long they live. Cassandra scoffed dismissively.
Humph.
You're all in cahoots, aren't you? Get out at once. Leave my library. After being taunted by Cassandra, Madame Pants burned with fury. Her temper had once again clouded her judgment, and without further thought, she foolishly ordered Xiaoji and the others to leave. Xiaoji grimaced inwardly. He dreaded dealing with stubborn, unreasonable, argumentative elders like this. Thankfully, this situation shouldn't last long. He'd already sent a message to Professor Dumbledore via their ring. High atop the tower, that stone chamber remained as gloomy as ever. Yet the person imprisoned within was in rather good spirits today. He was greeted by a visitor, and his tone rang with cheerfulness. Albus, it's been ages since you last came to see me. I'm so glad you're here today. You know I only come here out of routine, to inspect the magical seals. I'm required to do so once every year. Outside the tower, an elderly man with a long beard stood expressionlessly. It was Professor Dumbledore. The stone chamber sat at the very peak of the tower, yet aside from a narrow window, resembling a crack, there was no other exit. No door at all. Oh, right. You're merely checking the seals. You're afraid I'd still cause trouble if set free. But why must you wait until my birthday to do it? Professor Dumbledore said nothing, merely standing silently outside. The tower's shadow under moonlight obscured his face, making it impossible to discern his expression. You should know I'm quite old now. Even if you released me, I'd merely be an old wreck. I'd no longer be capable of anything. Surely you'd feel at ease now. Or perhaps you truly can't accomplish anything anymore, but the name Grindelwald still exists. Even if you refuse, others will compel you to act. Professor Dumbledore sighed, then turned away. Are you leaving again? The prisoner couldn't help but ask. It's been so long since we last met. Can't we speak a bit longer? Or are you still worried I'd somehow ensnare you anew? There's nothing left for us to discuss long ago. Is that so? What a pity. Every year when you turn and leave, I assume it's forever. I probably won't live much longer. I'm quite elderly myself now, Gellert. Suddenly, Professor Dumbledore felt his ring heating up. He promptly pressed his finger against it, and a message instantly appeared in his mind. This was the ring modified by Xiaoji. No parchment was needed anymore to manifest its contents. Professor, if you don't return soon, I'll be permanently banned from the library. I still haven't finished my homework. Though, if you'd grant me an exemption from all future assignments, I wouldn't mind never returning to the library at all. Professor Dumbledore couldn't help but smile. A rather amusing little spell, isn't it? It's been ages since I last saw you smile, especially when you come here. The prisoner, as if capable of seeing through stone walls, noticed Dumbledore's smile. Who sent this message? I'd wager it's your favorite student, Newt, back in the day. Who is it now? Chapter 166. Tom, you're the nicest. Unlike that old man. Just as Madame Pants summoned Filch, intending to drag Xiaji and the others to Professor McGonagall's office, Dumbledore appeared. He arrived surprisingly quickly, much to Xiaji's disappointment. Xiaji remained completely unfazed at the prospect of being taken to Professor McGonagall's office. After all, McGonagall was quite reasonable. Once he explained the situation, he'd surely be absolved of any wrongdoing. Moreover, had Dumbledore not arrived in time, Xiaji figured he'd have been exempt from future homework assignments. Yet he never expected Dumbledore to return so promptly, all to ensure Xiaji continued diligently completing his tasks. There was no way Dumbledore could have been handling any business near the school. The amount of magical energy Xiaji had expended when sending him that message proved this beyond doubt. Just 10 minutes prior, Dumbledore hadn't even been in Britain. Honestly, the old man was far too strict. Xiaji genuinely believed skipping those 043 assignments was perfectly acceptable. Oh, my apologies. I myself took this computer from Xiaji's home earlier. I neglected to mention it to you. This is indeed an item modified by Xiaji, Dumbledore explained gently to Madame Pants, smiling warmly. Madame Pants pursed her lips. Since Dumbledore himself confirmed it, what else could she possibly say? Deep down, she doubted whether Xiaji's claims were true, yet her anger had clouded her judgment, causing her to ignore any inconvenient facts. Dumbledore's azure eyes gazed calmly at her. I believe you owe Xiaji an apology. He only intended to repair your computer. Besides, this device is his personal property, merely lent temporarily to Hogwarts. Reluctantly, Madame Pants apologized to Xiaji and vowed to treat young witches and wizards more kindly in the future. It's all right. I bear some responsibility too. I should have explained things first before attempting repairs. That naturally led to your misunderstanding. Xiaji replied graciously. He wasn't one to hold grudges, so he readily admitted his fault. As they left the library, Xiaji muttered unhappily, You really didn't have to rush back so quickly? That simply wouldn't do. Dumbledore chuckled slyly. Homework serves as a vital tool for reinforcing students' learning. As headmaster, I insist no one should be exempt. Professor, homework is exhausting. Yet, I hear Miss Granger has been writing your assignments for you? Hearing this, Hermione's face turned deathly pale. Oh no, her secret of doing his work had been exposed. If Dumbledore knew, McGonagall would inevitably find out too. And if McGonagall learned of it, good heavens, she'd lose 50 points. Dumbledore glanced at Hermione with a smile. This time, I'll spare McGonagall the details. Just don't let it happen again. Overjoyed, Hermione gazed gratefully at him. Xiaji shot Dumbledore a pouty look. This was far too harsh. He truly hated doing homework. Dumbledore winked at him and then departed. Hermione turned to Xiaji, mustering courage. I absolutely cannot write your assignments anymore. I've told you countless times this isn't right. Yet you keep tricking me into doing them. Cassandra Vole stared at Xiaji with utter disdain, utterly disgusted by his behavior toward the innocent girl. I wasn't lying earlier. Honestly, doing homework offers me little benefit now. I already grasp everything the teachers teach. But for you, rewriting it solidifies your own knowledge. Xiaji replied earnestly. That's exactly how he tricked me into helping him. Hermione pointed at Xiaji, then turned to Cassandra. Come on. We're ignoring him. He's utterly vile. Cassandra followed Hermione away, leaving Xiaji alone. But I was speaking truthfully. Dejected, he realized he'd never have messaged Dumbledore at all. Tonight, the old man had shown him zero mercy. Had Xiaji perhaps interrupted something important? With a gloomy expression, Xiaji returned to his dormitory and retrieved his diary. Tom, Snape assigns far too much homework. I barely get time to do anything else. He's utterly dreadful. Don't worry, I'll handle it for you. Oh, Tom Riddle, you truly are the kindest. Unlike that wretched old man Dumbledore. Dumbledore is undeniably hypocritical. Xiaji came to Hogwarts purely for the experience. Most classes posed no challenge whatsoever. Only the castle's hidden secrets intrigue him. He sensed this ancient fortress held far more secrets than novels ever revealed, merely the tip of the iceberg. Very well, this lesson concludes here. Practice diligently at home. Transforming beetles into buttons isn't particularly difficult. With that, Transfiguration class ended and students filed out. Xiaji stay behind. McGonagall called as he packed his books, preparing to leave. Xiaji motioned Cassandra onward, then followed McGonagall back to her office. Your transfiguration skills have advanced so far, she smiled warmly, that attending extra classes is now unnecessary. You've already mastered all I could teach. Well, even if I gain no new knowledge, simply hearing your wisdom is reward enough, Xiaji replied sweetly, his words dripping honey. McGonagall beamed. I summoned you for 2 reasons. First, I wish to invite you to my Transfiguration Club. A club? Xiaji asked curiously. What exactly is it? Each professor establishes such a group, inviting top-performing students to discuss and explore our subject, McGonagall explained. I should have invited you last year, but deemed you too young. Yet your progress astonished me. This year, I simply must have you join. She seemed genuinely thrilled. Of course. I'd be honored, Xiaji replied. How could he refuse such an offer? Besides, evenings were free anyway. Tom Riddle could easily handle any homework. No problem at all. Agreed then, McGonagall exclaimed delightedly. Now, what's the second matter? This is also good news, though we've encountered a slight complication. Chapter 167, a transfiguration paper that shook the wizarding world. Do you still remember that transfiguration essay you wrote? Oh, I do remember it. To be honest, had Professor McGonagall not brought it up again, Xiaji would have already forgotten about it. I sent that essay to the editorial board of Transfiguration today. They were utterly astonished and agreed to publish it exactly as is, without any edits. Isn't that a good thing? Why would there be any trouble? Professor McGonagall's expression darkened, as if recalling something unpleasant. The trouble is that the editor-in-chief is a stubborn man who refuses to believe this essay was written by you. They assume it was written by me and insist on attributing it to my name, not yours. Then it's perfectly fine to attribute it to you, Professor. Xiaji shrugged indifferently. Reputation was such a troublesome thing. Wasn't Harry currently suffering precisely because of it? Even taking a bath seemed fraught with peril for him. Of course, this was all because someone had completely forgotten she was the one responsible for making Harry's life so miserable. Absolutely not. Do you take me for someone who would falsely claim credit for someone else's work? Professor McGonagall replied indignantly. My apologies, Professor. I didn't mean it that way. I know you're not that sort of person. If they refuse to believe it's mine, then I see no need to publish it at all, Xiaji said casually. Oh, Xiaji, you still fail to grasp just how valuable this essay truly is. But this is merely a theoretical proposition. Strictly speaking, most people wouldn't be able to perform the transformations described in it. Surely, such an essay holds little practical value. Xiaji's essay merely outlined a theoretical possibility, though the conditions required to achieve it were extremely stringent. No, your essay holds tremendous value. True, many people simply cannot perform human transfiguration using your method. This depends on their magical power and skill in transfiguration. But the implications of your work are immense. Professor McGonagall spoke earnestly. There are many individuals who have undergone failed human transfigurations and now live as monsters. Thanks to your essay, they might regain their human forms. They'd only need to master part of your theory, not the whole thing. Now do you realize just how significant your essay is? Once irreversible human transfigurations become reversible, even the highly complex animagus magic will no longer be as dangerous, because even if it fails, one can revert back to normal form. This represents a monumental advancement in transfiguration. You'll undoubtedly be awarded the Order of Merlin. Perhaps such honors mean little to you, but your essay could save countless lives. That's why I urge you to publish it. Very well. In that case, Professor, why don't you arrange a meeting between me and this editor? I'll perform a few transformations right in front of him, and he'll surely believe it's my work. Oh, that's an excellent idea. Professor McGonagall exclaimed delightedly. Xiaji stayed a while longer before finally leaving her office. It seemed being so young had its downsides. People constantly doubted his abilities. Yet being young also helped him deceive his enemies. Cassandra was leaning against the corridor wall, reading a book, clearly waiting for him. I figured you'd have left first. Humph. It's not too late now. Let's go eat together. I'm starving. I hope that big-mouth Hufflepuff friend of yours doesn't come looking for you again. If he dares show up, I'll kick him back where he came from. This is Gryffindor territory. The problem is, he always tries to snatch food off my plate during meals. October weather had already turned bitterly cold. At least, that's how Xiaji felt. The damp chill seeped into every corner of the castle, causing many young witches and wizards to catch colds. Never before had Xiaji regretted joining the Quidditch team so much. Even in such freezing conditions, that maniac would refuse to cancel practice. Only heaven knew how miserable it felt to fly around soaked to the bone in such weather. Halloween was approaching fast. The pumpkins Hagrid had planted had grown to be the size of small greenhouses. It seemed Hagrid had secretly cast an expansion charm on them, and it had worked splendidly. Xiaji and Cassandra entered Gryffindor Castle, dripping wet. Xiaji flicked his hand, and instantly both their soaked clothes dried completely. Harry struggled through the muddy ground to catch up with Xiaji, hoping to get his own clothes dried as well. It doesn't meet the criteria. It's just half an inch short. Nearly headless Nick gazed gloomily out the window. Hello, Nick. Now fully dry, Harry's mood had improved. He cheerfully greeted Gryffindor's resident ghost. Hello. Nick appeared somewhat flustered. He hastily folded a translucent letter and tucked it into his tunic. You seem preoccupied, young Potter. You too, I'd say. Harry replied helplessly. He had plenty of worries. Those 7 Nimbus, 2001 brooms in Slytherin, not to mention those ever-present Harry Potter fan club members. Suddenly, he felt utterly exhausted, yet dared not voice it. Xiaji, the true overlord, stood right beside him. It's nothing really. I never even wanted to join. I assumed I'd qualify, but apparently, I don't meet the criteria. Though Nick tried to act nonchalant, the pain on his face betrayed him. Suddenly, he erupted in fury, pulling the translucent letter back out. Tell me, does having one's neck hacked at 44 times with a dull axe qualify someone to join the Headless Hunt? Harry hadn't yet responded, but Xiaji spoke up first. Right now, you truly don't qualify to join the Headless Hunt. Nick flew into a rage. I don't want to be part of it either. I wish they'd just get it done properly. I wish my head would completely and utterly separate from my body. In fury, he tore his own head off. Only a few strands of skin and sinew still connected it to his neck.
See?
It's only because my head isn't fully detached. Swish! Xiaji suddenly drew his wand and made a light motion. A purple blade of light sliced across Nick's neck. Instantly, Nick's head fell clean off.
There.
Now you qualified to join the Headless Hunt. Nick stared blankly at his detached head in his hands. Had this age-old conundrum finally been resolved today? Am I dreaming? But do ghosts even dream? Chapter 168. Tom, it's time to eat chicken. Xiaji had no idea whether ghosts could dream or not. After all, he himself wasn't a ghost. Even the ghosts themselves had no clear answer to this question. After all, their existence as ghosts closely resembled a dream in the first place. Perhaps what truly survived within them was merely a memory storage unit carrying all their past memories. Xiaji also noticed that there was still a slight difference between so-called ghosts and pure souls. However, exactly what that difference entailed remained unknown to him for now. Perhaps in the future, He'd find the answer by observing Tom. Oh, thank you, Xiaoji. Though I have no idea how you managed this. Thank you so much. Nick's eyes instantly grew moist. There's no need to thank me. I've merely conducted some research into soul magic over the years. After finally seeing his long-held wish come true, Nick was absolutely elated. I'd like to mention that this coming Halloween Eve marks my 500th death anniversary. I plan to host a grand party. Many friends from all over the world will attend. Should you three be able to join, I'd be immensely honored. Nick gazed at Xiaoji and the others with hopeful eyes. Behind him, Cassandra subtly tugged at Xiaoji's robe. Compared to attending a death anniversary party filled with ghosts, she'd much rather stay in the Great Hall for the school's official banquet. Xiaoji knew both Harry and Cassandra were reluctant to go, yet he himself felt quite intrigued. Nick, I'm truly delighted to receive your invitation. I'll definitely be present at your anniversary celebration. Xiaoji harbored great interest in souls existing in ghostly forms. Such a party would undoubtedly attract numerous ghosts. It would be the perfect opportunity for observation. Besides, how many living people could claim to have ever attended a ghost party? It sounded utterly awesome.
Oh,
That's wonderful. I feared you might decline. Of course, I'd also be thrilled if your friends joined us. Nick turned his hopeful gaze toward Harry and Cassandra. Harry simply nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Cassandra subtly twisted the soft flesh along Xiaoji's waist while gracefully accepting the invitation.
filth.
Dirty scum. Argus Filch suddenly appeared behind them, fury blazing in his eyes as he pointed at the ground trampled by Xiaoji and the others. There were numerous muddy stains caused by drips from their clothes. Absolute filth everywhere. I've had enough of this. You three, come with me at once. Do you realize how long it takes me to clean up such messes? I'm talking an entire hour of scrubbing. Filch bellowed furiously. Oh, surely a simple spell could resolve this. Why bother wiping it manually? Xiaoji narrowed his eyes slightly, as though peering straight into Filch's innermost thoughts. Silence. I mean, my spells are sufficient. Now, just leave at once. Filch's expression turned a mix of shock and rage, as though his most vital secret had been exposed. Xiaoji smirked, then snapped his fingers. Instantly, all traces of mud vanished, leaving the floor gleaming spotless. Let's go. Xiaoji beckoned Harry and the others onward, leaving Filch standing awkwardly in place. Xiaoji, how did you pull that off? Why didn't Filch punish us? Normally, he'd have dragged us to his office for punishment. Once they'd distanced themselves, Harry asked, bewildered. Everyone has secrets they'd rather keep hidden, Harry. I uncovered one of his secrets, so he'd rather not risk me revealing it. That's why he let us go. What kind of secret? Harry inquired curiously. That's someone else's secret. I can't divulge it, Harry. You wouldn't want your own deepest secrets exposed either, right? Harry shook his head. Though still curious, he understood that Xiaoji wouldn't reveal it no matter what. All right, we should hurry back and change clothes. They're dry now, but still filthy. That maniac would. Why does he insist on training in this weather? I could devour an entire cow right now. The flock of roosters Xiaoji raised was growing rapidly. They'd become far larger than ordinary roosters, easily twice their size. They'd been fed feed laced with phoenix blood, resulting in their extraordinary size and vigor. If Snape ever learned that Xiaoji used precious phoenix blood to feed chickens, he'd undoubtedly slice Xiaoji into pieces and feed him to pigs. It was sheer waste. Xiaoji realized it was time to make an offering to Tom. When he took the diary out of his suitcase, he was holding a rooster of truly monstrous size. Yet despite their notorious aggression, these roosters remained docile as lambs in Xiaoji's grasp. Snap! Xiaoji snapped his fingers, instantly knocking the rooster unconscious. He then retrieved a wooden box and took out the diary. Tom, I stole this rooster from Hagrid. I chose one particularly large and robust. I figured you'd love it. Hagrid has plenty more. Losing one won't be noticed at all. Perfect. Now slit its throat and drip its blood onto the diary. Initially indifferent, Tom grew ecstatic upon seeing the rooster. Its soul carried immense power. He could practically taste it. For Tom, such a soul was an unparalleled nourishment. Moreover, such a massive physique implied vastly greater vitality than ordinary roosters. With this, he'd swiftly regain enough strength to fully dominate Xiaji. Xiaji sliced the rooster's throat with a small blade. It died instantly in its slumber, offering no resistance. He then dripped its blood onto the open diary and placed the entire body atop it. Instantly, the blood seemed drawn from the rooster's neck by some invisible force, vanishing into the diary's pages. Within moments, the entire rooster was completely drained of blood. Xiaji sensed the rooster's soul vanish entirely, and naturally, all manipulations he'd embedded within it. A subtle smile curled at his lips. "Senior, this should sustain you for quite some time." Once all blood was absorbed, Xiaji couldn't resist writing a note to the diary. "Indeed, I feel far stronger now. If only I could obtain several more such roosters." Tom recalled Xiaji mentioning Hagrid's massive flock. Eager to accelerate his recovery, he subtly urged Xiaji to steal more. Just 2 more roosters would suffice to grant him enough power to dominate Xiaji completely. Chapter 169. Dare to touch it? Voldemort helped write this homework. "All right, I'll steal a few more roosters, but I'll need to wait for the right moment. These roosters are quite ferocious. I've been waiting several days just to steal one." Xiaji replied to Tom's request rather reluctantly. "I wonder how Hagrid managed to raise roosters this big." "You've done well, Xiaji. I'll help you write today's homework. All you have to do is copy it down." Tom saw no problem with this. He recognized Hagrid as that silly giant who loved raising all sorts of monsters. Thus, it seemed perfectly normal for him to raise such monstrously large roosters. After Xiaji finished copying Tom's homework, "May I please not be locked inside the box? Staying in there all the time gets boring. I'd like to see more of Hogwarts." "Of course, Xiaji. We're best friends, aren't we?" Xiaji wrote, then secretly snapped his fingers behind his back. Immediately afterward, the diary automatically closed, and Tom fell into a deep slumber. Xiaji swiftly tossed the diary back into its wooden box, then dusted off his hands and stood up. TSK, Tom really excels at writing homework. This essay is absolutely brilliant. After absorbing the soul and vitality of the rooster Xiaji had prepared, Tom had completely fallen under Xiaji's control. Xiaji could make him fall asleep whenever he wished, and awaken him at will as well. Most importantly, upon waking, Tom wouldn't even realize he'd been asleep. He'd completely forget having absorbed the rooster's soul. Thus, every time Xiaji caught a rooster for him, it felt like the very first time to Tom. From then on, Tom remained trapped in this cycle. Each time he absorbed a rooster's essence, he gained the illusion that he was on the verge of amassing enough power. Unfortunately, though, Xiaji couldn't allow him to absorb all 10 roosters' souls at once. He had to wait until Tom fully digested one rooster's essence before preparing the next. Once Tom had consumed all 10 rooster souls, he'd completely transform into Xiaji's own form. Xiaji's artificially created soul would dominate Tom's fragmented essence. At that point, Tom would hold no secrets whatsoever from Xiaji. Even that recipe stored in Tom's mind could be effortlessly read by Xiaji. Fortunately, Tom digested rather quickly. It seemed he could be fed once every day or so. In 10 days, Xiaji would finally obtain that potion recipe. Moreover, he'd gain an entirely different Tom, one who, Xiaji was certain, would leave Voldemort utterly astonished. Still, from now on, someone will always help me with homework. Having Voldemort personally write it for me? That'd be downright terrifying to admit out loud. Xiaji lazily cleaned up the rooster remains. It was a real pity, such a massive rooster, yet now inedible since all its soul and vitality had been drained. That very day, right after morning classes, Xiaji was summoned to Professor McGonagall's office. Upon entering, he spotted Philip Calvin, editor-in-chief of Transfiguration Today. Calvin arrived far later than Xiaji had anticipated. Xiaji had expected him last month. Calvin was a portly, bald, middle-aged man whose demeanor somewhat resembled Minister for Magic Cornelius Fudge. He sat arrogantly upon a chair in McGonagall's office. "So, you're the Transfiguration Prodigy Professor McGonagall mentioned, Siaji?" "Yes, that's me," Siaji replied without any trace of humility. Calvin appeared somewhat surprised. He'd expected Siaji to at least be modest. Evidently, he was nothing more than a conceited brat. He couldn't comprehend why McGonagall had attributed such a groundbreaking essay to a mere 12-year-old wizard. It was simple. All data cited in the paper stemmed from the author's successful transformations. How could such a young wizard possibly master such profound human transfiguration? Thus, it seemed utterly absurd for a 12-year-old to have authored such a paper. Only true transfiguration masters like McGonagall or Professor Dumbledore could have achieved such a feat. "Are you absolutely certain this essay was written by you?" Calvin gazed down at Siaji with utter disdain. He wondered what bribes this kid had offered McGonagall to secure authorship rights to such a valuable piece. "Yes, it was indeed written by me," Siaji replied calmly. "Heh." Calvin sneered. "With all due respect, at your age, you simply couldn't have composed such a paper." McGonagall pursed her lips, clearly angered by Calvin's mockery. "Perhaps this gentleman doesn't quite grasp the meaning of the word prodigy." Siaji remained unruffled. "If I had to wait until I was 100 to write such a paper, I wouldn't qualify as a prodigy, would I?" "Hey." But this time, Siaji had no intention of wasting words. "Enough. Save your blather. I've no time to waste on you. I'll demonstrate right here the human transfiguration I described in the paper." Truthfully, had Professor McGonagall not persistently urged me to publish it, I'd have bothered explaining it to you at all. Calvin fumed, but before he could retort to Siaji's arrogance, Siaji transformed right before his eyes into a majestic, awe-inspiring lion. Roar! The thunderous roar nearly deafened Calvin. Then, the lion twisted and reshaped itself into a tiny black kitten curled on the floor. McGonagall's eyes shone with delight. She couldn't resist picking up the kitten. The kitten transformed once more in her hands, now resembling an owl somewhat akin to Crookshanks. The owl circled above Calvin's head, then landed on the ground, reverting to human form, Siaji himself. Calvin's jaw hung agape. He stood utterly speechless from shock. Such flawless human transfiguration was beyond even McGonagall's capabilities. Only one explanation fit. Siaji truly was the essay's author. Only the author could possess such intimate familiarity with those principles and execute such fluid transformations. Yet he was merely an 11 or 12-year-old wizard. Could he truly be Merlin reincarnated? Suddenly, Calvin recalled Siaji's earlier words. "Here, allow me to apologize, Siaji. Only now do I truly grasp the meaning of prodigy. Yes, today I've come to understand what a true prodigy actually is." Chapter 170. Siaji, Cassandra Vole, I have always kept my promises to you. This was merely something Siaji wrote out of sheer boredom. He didn't place much importance on it at all. As for publishing it, that was only done at Professor McGonagall's request. He truly didn't care under whose name it was published. I accept your apologies. At the same time, I'd like you to apologize to Professor McGonagall as well. She is a true master of transfiguration. She's not at all the kind of person you seem to believe her to be, someone willing to sell off her own writings for personal gain. You've underestimated her, Siaji said calmly. Upon hearing Siaji's words, Professor McGonagall's tightly pressed lips relaxed slightly, and the corners of her mouth rose in a faint smile. Siaji had voiced exactly what she herself thought. What troubled her most wasn't the editor's disbelief that Siaji could write such a paper. After all, she'd have doubted it too. What truly angered her was Calvin's assumption that she'd handed over the copyright only after receiving sufficient compensation from a mere student. I'm sorry, Minerva. I shouldn't have doubted you. Calvin sincerely apologized to Professor McGonagall, who eventually accepted his apology. Before long, Siaji emerged from her office. From here on out, Professor McGonagall would discuss further matters with Calvin, so she told Siaji there was no need for him to stay and handle any trivial details. He should leave at once lest he miss his next class. Cassandra Vole was still leaning against the hallway wall, reading a book. "All right, let's go," Xiaji called out to her. He glanced at the book's title, Today's Transfiguration. Xiaji chuckled. "You're quite interested in transfiguration too?" Cassandra tucked the book away. "Our whole family reads Today's Transfiguration. The articles within are truly excellent. We've learned so much about transfiguration from them. I even published a paper in it. It should appear in the next issue." "Was it the one you brought to Professor McGonagall last time?" Cassandra asked. "Exactly. Just now, the editor of Today's Transfiguration came to see me. At first, he refused to believe I'd written it myself." Xiaji shrugged. "But I don't blame him. Honestly, I wouldn't have believed it either. You know, before I met you, I never believed there was anyone my age capable of standing on equal footing with me," Cassandra said. Her dark green eyes gazed at Xiaji. "I figured no one was good enough to even speak to me. My abilities far surpassed theirs." Xiaji listened quietly. Sometimes, truly listening was the best way to deepen a friendship. "Now, though, I've changed my mind because I've met two people." She paused. "One is Hermione. Though she sometimes acts like a bookish nerd, I must admit she's incredibly gifted. Her only flaw is a lack of talent for flying, but otherwise, she matches me perfectly. The other is you, Xiaji. I used to believe no one my age could ever surpass, or even equal me. But after meeting you, I've changed my perspective. I never would have imagined anyone could dominate me in every single aspect." "Cassandra, how talented someone is has nothing to do with whether they're fit to be friends," Xiaji sighed. "If what you say were true, then within all of Hogwarts, only Professor Dumbledore himself could possibly be my friend. And I certainly have no desire for that. But Cassandra lowered her head, the head she'd always held high. I don't want the gap between us to keep widening. You might not care, but I'd feel utterly inferior. Those words, though, she never voiced aloud. Xiaji gazed into her eyes and offered a gentle smile. "I've never forgotten what I promised you." "What you promised me?" Cassandra looked up. Was he referring to her unreasonable request for him to help her grow stronger? "Let's go together. I'll never leave anyone behind." With those meaningful words, Xiaji turned and headed toward the classroom for his next lesson. Snapping back to reality, Cassandra hurriedly jogged after him. Days passed uneventfully. Aside from attending classes, Xiaji spent his time training with Cassandra on the Quidditch team. He still had no rush to open the Chamber of Secrets. Without adequate preparation, he wouldn't dare do so. True, he doubted any real danger awaited him, but the basilisk's eyes were terrifying. Anyone who met its gaze would perish instantly. Xiaji wanted to avoid any accidents, like that of Myrtle, who died so unexpectedly. He believed Tom Riddle's original intent in opening the chamber was merely to sow fear among students of Muggle descent, driving them to drop out and thus purging Hogwarts of impure bloodlines. Back then, Tom had no desire to kill anyone. Not because he was kind-hearted, but because if the basilisk had killed freely, Hogwarts would have been shut down, forcing him back to that dreadful orphanage. Myrtle's death was purely an accident. Tom never imagined she'd be hiding in a stall of the girls' lavatory when he opened the chamber. That mishap drew Professor Dumbledore's attention, forcing Tom's plans to collapse. To prevent Hogwarts closure, he pinned the blame on Hagrid. Only after Hagrid's expulsion did the incident finally end. It was also around that time that Voldemort crafted his first Horcrux, the diary. Xiaji figured it would be far safer to extract all of Tom's secrets regarding the chamber first, then open it. Otherwise, another accidental death might leave him in the same predicament Tom once faced, utterly helpless. Tom was nearly finished absorbing all 10 Horcruxes. Xiaji could surely wait those few days. Halloween approached swiftly. Cassandra remained slightly annoyed that Xiaji had so casually agreed to attend Nick's 500th anniversary feast. Yet since she'd agreed herself, she had no choice but to steel herself and accompany him that night. On the morning of Halloween, Xiaji received the latest issue of Today's Transfiguration. His paper had predictably been published, though he paid it little mind. He casually handed the magazine to Cassandra and then focused on his bowl of rice porridge. Good heavens! Is this real? Xia Ji won the most promising newcomer award.